In the hushed, opulent world of five-star dining, some names are spoken only in whispers. At Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, the Gilded Quill, one name was a thunderclap of fear: Genevieve Davenport. She was the millionaire's wife, a woman whose cruelty was as legendary as her husband's fortune. She could end a career with a single cutting remark. For years, she reigned supreme, a flawless tyrant in a kingdom of crystal and silver. But tyrants always have a weakness. They build their empires on foundations of lies. And what happens when a new waitress, a quiet, observant woman with nothing to lose and a past she thought she'd left behind, starts pulling at the threads? This isn't a story about revenge. It's about the quiet dismantling of a monster, one perfectly served meal at a time. The air inside the Gilded Quill tasted of money. It was a complex, layered flavor, a base note of aged leather from the Chesterfield sofas in the lounge, a mid-note of expensive French perfume mingling with beeswax from the polished oak paneling, and a sharp metallic top note of ambition. For Chloe Mitchell, it was the taste of desperation. Just 3 months ago, she'd been a junior research assistant for Daniel Peterson, one of Chicago's most tenacious investigative journalists, meticulously cross-referencing sources and chasing down obscure public records. Then the newspaper had downsized, and her dream along with her salary evaporated. Now she was adjusting the ridiculously stiff collar of a uniform that cost more than her last 3 pairs of shoes combined. Her first shift was a dizzying ballet of rules. Water glasses were to be filled to precisely 1 inch below the rim, never more, never less. Bread plates were cleared from the left, entrees served from the right. A dropped fork was to be ignored until the guest looked away, at which point it was to be retrieved with a silent, swift elegance that bordered on magic. The one rule that wasn't written in the thick employee handbook was the most important one. It was delivered by Liam, the veteran bartender, whose face was a road map of late nights and cynical observations. He was polishing a highball glass with a linen cloth, his movements economical and practiced. "See that table?" he murmured, nodding toward the corner booth, the most coveted seat in the house, currently empty. "That's the throne. And the Queen arrives at 8 every Friday." Chloe followed his gaze. The booth was upholstered in plush burgundy velvet, set slightly apart from the others, offering both privacy and a commanding view of the entire dining room. "The Queen?" Chloe asked. "Genevieve Davenport," Liam said, his voice dropping an octave. He placed the glass on the rack, the crystal ringing softly. "Wife of Richard Davenport. You know, Davenport Industries, the man who basically owns half the steel used in this city's skyscrapers." Chloe knew the name. Everyone in Chicago did. Richard Davenport was a titan, a figure of immense power and quiet influence. His wife, however, was a different kind of famous. She was a fixture in the society pages, always immaculate, always poised, her smile a perfect frozen sculpture. "She's our most important regular," Liam continued, his eyes scanning the room. "And our most feared. Don't make eye contact unless she addresses you. Don't speak unless spoken to. If she asks for her water with a single perfectly square ice cube and a lemon slice cut at a 30-degree angle, you go to the kitchen and you find a protractor if you have to." He paused, his expression darkening. "One mistake, one perceived slight, and she will not rest until she sees you personally fired and possibly blacklisted from every fine dining establishment west of the Hudson." Chloe felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was more than just a demanding customer. This was a predator. "Is she really that bad?" she asked. Liam gave a short, mirthless laugh. "Last month, a busboy, Kevin, a kid just saving up for college, accidentally brushed her cashmere wrap with his tray. It didn't even fall, just touched it. She claimed he'd soiled it with his commonness. She made such a scene that Mr. Henderson, the manager, had to fire him on the spot, right in the middle of service. She watched him cry as he took off his apron. Seemed to enjoy it. The story settled like a stone in Chloe's gut. In her previous job, she'd dealt with arrogant executives and evasive politicians, but this was a different breed of cruelty, personal, petty, and performed for an audience. At precisely 8 p.m., a hush fell over the entrance. The hostess, a young woman named Amelia whose smile seemed permanently strained, practically bowed as she led the couple to table 7. Richard Davenport was tall and broad-shouldered, his graying hair impeccably styled. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to the world reshaping itself around him. But all eyes were on his wife. Genevieve Davenport was a masterpiece of cold perfection. Her blonde hair was swept into an elaborate chignon, not a single strand out of place. A sheath of a midnight blue dress clung to her slender frame, and a cascade of diamonds glittered at her throat. But it was her face that was most striking. It was beautiful, undeniably, but it was a hard, unforgiving beauty, like a statue carved from ice. Her eyes, a pale, chilly blue, swept across the dining room, and Chloe could feel the staff flinch as her gaze passed over them. It was a look of assessment and instant dismissal. Chloe was assigned to the station adjacent to table 7, a nerve-wracking proximity. For the first hour, she focused on her own tables, her movements becoming more fluid as she found her rhythm. She could hear Genevieve's voice, a low, controlled tone that carried despite its softness. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. Her power was in her precision. She sent back her Sauvignon Blanc because she detected a cloying note of melon, despite the sommelier's gentle insistence that it was a hallmark of the vintage. She complained that the ambient lighting was casting an unflattering shadow on her husband's face. Each complaint was a small test, a reassertion of her dominance. The real display came during the main course. A young waiter named Sam, his face pale with nerves, was serving the table next to the Davenports. As he leaned in to place a plate of seared scallops before a guest, his sleeve cuff, for a fraction of a second, hovered over the edge of Genevieve's side plate. He didn't touch it. He wasn't even close. But Genevieve recoiled as if he tried to poison her. "Excuse me," she said. The two words cut through the dining room's murmur like a knife. Sam froze, his blood draining from his face. "Yes, Mrs. Davenport." "Did you see what you just did?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Your arm, it was over my plate. My food." I'm so sorry, Mrs. Davenport. I didn't touch anything." "You didn't have to," she replied, placing her fork down with a deliberate click. "The air is contaminated. The very thought of your sleeve, which has brushed against who knows what today, hovering over my meal, it's simply unhygienic. I've lost my appetite." She pushed her plate of half-eaten Dover sole an inch away from her. "Take it away. All of it." Richard Davenport sighed, a quiet, weary sound, but said nothing. He simply stared at his own plate. A man trapped in a gilded cage with a very beautiful, very venomous snake denimar. Henderson materialized at the table, his face a mask of pained apology. He stammered. He groveled. He offered to have the entire dish remade by the executive chef himself. Sam stood behind him, trembling, looking like a condemned man. Chloe watched the entire pathetic spectacle. This wasn't about hygiene. It wasn't about the food. It was a power play, a public execution designed to remind everyone in the room of their place in her world. She felt a familiar fire ignite in her chest, the same indignation that had fueled her work with Daniel Peterson. It was the feeling of seeing an injustice, a gross abuse of power, and knowing it was wrong. Liam had called this place the Dragon's Lair. He was right. And Chloe Mitchell, standing in the shadows with a water pitcher in her hand, had just met the dragon. What he didn't know was that Chloe had spent the last 3 years of her life learning how to find the cracks in the armor of untouchable people. That a week later, Chloe found herself in the dragon's direct line of fire. It was another busy Friday night, the dining room a symphony of clinking glasses and moneyed laughter. By a cruel twist of fate, the waiter assigned to table 7 had called in sick with a sudden, violent case of what Liam cynically termed Davenportitis. Mr. Henderson, his face ashen, had surveyed the remaining staff like a general choosing a soldier for a suicide mission. His eyes landed on Chloe. "Mitchell," he said, his voice low and tense. "You're calm under pressure. You're on table 7 tonight. A wave of sympathetic murmurs rippled through the staff. Liam caught her eye from behind the bar and gave a subtle shake of his head, a silent warning. But Chloe simply nodded. Yes, Mr. Henderson. She spent the next 15 minutes preparing as if for battle. She reread the Davenport's file, memorizing their preferences. Genevieve favored still water, no ice, with a single paper-thin slice of lime, not lemon. She preferred her bread basket to contain only brioche, no sourdough. Richard drank a specific single malt scotch, Macallan 25, 2 fingers, no mixer. Every detail was a potential landmine. When the Davenports arrived, Chloe was ready. She approached the table with a practiced neutrality, her posture straight, her expression placid. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Davenport. My name is Chloe, and I will be your server tonight. Genevieve's eyes flickered over her, a cold, dismissive appraisal. She didn't acknowledge the greeting. Still water. Lime, she clipped, already turning her attention to the menu. Of course, Chloe replied, her tone even. She executed the initial service flawlessly. The water was presented. The scotch poured. The brioche-only bread basket placed gently on the table. For a moment, Chloe thought she might survive the evening unscathed. The illusion shattered when Genevieve ordered the lobster bisque. 10 minutes later, Chloe placed the delicate porcelain bowl before her. The bisque was a velvety coral-colored liquid, garnished with a sprig of chervil and a drizzle of cognac cream. Genevieve stared at it for a long moment before picking up her spoon. She dipped it in, raised it halfway to her lips, and then stopped. Her eyes narrowed. She lowered the spoon and looked directly at Chloe for the first time. Is there a problem with the kitchen tonight? Chloe's heart began to beat a little faster. Not at all, Mrs. Davenport. Is the bisque not to your liking? It's tepid, Genevieve announced, her voice resonating with theatrical disappointment. It was loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. I expect my soup to be hot. Not lukewarm, not tepid. Hot. Is that such a difficult concept to grasp? Chloe knew for a fact that the soup was not tepid. She had watched the sous chef ladle it from the pot herself, steam rising in a fragrant cloud. This was the test. This was the moment where she was expected to grovel, to apologize profusely, to panic. It was the first move in Genevieve's cruel game of chess. Instead of falling apart, Chloe's mind went into research mode. She observed. Genevieve wasn't looking angry. She was looking expectant. She was waiting for the fear, for the reaction that would validate her power. Chloe decided not to give it to her. I am very sorry to hear that, Mrs. Davenport, Chloe said, her voice a perfect blend of professional concern and unshakable calm. I will have a fresh, piping hot bowl brought to you immediately. She reached for the bowl, but Genevieve placed her hand over the rim, her long manicured fingers pressing against the porcelain. No. Don't bother. The moment is ruined. She looked at her husband. You see, Richard. This is what I mean. The standards here are slipping. Utterly slipping. Richard Davenport merely swirled the amber liquid in his glass. It's just soup, Jen. It is never just soup, Richard, she snapped back, her voice like ice. It is a reflection of a standard. A standard this waitress clearly doesn't understand. Her gaze returned to Chloe, sharp and venomous. What did you say your name was again? Chloe, Mrs. Davenport. Chloe, Genevieve repeated, savoring the name as if it were a sour grape. Well, Chloe, I suggest you learn the difference between hot and tepid if you expect to last another night in this establishment. The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The diners at the next table were now openly staring, their own conversations forgotten. This was the show they had come to see. Chloe held Genevieve's gaze. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I understand completely, Mrs. Davenport. Thank you for the clarification. I will ensure the rest of your meal is to your exact specifications. She retrieved the bowl of bisque and walked back toward the kitchen, her steps measured and even. She could feel every eye in the room on her back. Her composure was, in its own way, an act of defiance. An emotional outburst would have been a victory for Genevieve. Panic would have been a trophy. This calm, professional acceptance of a baseless complaint was something else entirely. It was a refusal to play the game by Genevieve's rules. When she entered the kitchen, the head chef, Antoine, a notoriously fiery Frenchman, looked at her with a mixture of pity and anger. The bisque was perfect. I checked the temperature myself. That woman is a witch. I know, Chloe said quietly. But she isn't angry about the soup. She returned to the dining room to continue the service. For the rest of the meal, Genevieve was icily silent toward her, communicating only through clipped gestures and pointed looks at her husband. But Chloe noticed something else. Genevieve kept glancing at her, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. It was the look of a predator whose prey had failed to behave as expected. She had tried to draw blood and had been met with a placid, unyielding surface. As they were leaving, Richard Davenport paused by Chloe's side for a moment while his wife swept ahead. He pressed a folded $100 bill into her hand discreetly. "I'm sorry about that," he mumbled, his eyes avoiding hers. "She's under a lot of stress." Chloe watched them go, the folded bill feeling like a guilty secret in her palm. It wasn't about stress. It was about power. And Chloe Mitchell, who had spent years dissecting the lives of powerful people for a living, had just realized that Genevieve Davenport's power was built on a very fragile foundation, the fear of others. And Chloe, much to her own surprise, wasn't afraid. She was curious. And for a woman like Genevieve Davenport, that was far more dangerous. The encounter with Genevieve lit a fuse in Chloe. It wasn't about revenge. It was about understanding the anatomy of a bully. In her journalism days, Daniel Peterson had taught her that the most monstrous people often lived in the most elaborate glass houses. You just had to know where to throw the stone. Chloe decided to start looking for stones. Her investigation began not on the internet, but in the trenches of the Gilded Quill. The restaurant staff was a living archive of Genevieve's tyranny, a library of whispered anecdotes and bitter memories. During lulls in service, in the cramped break room that smelled of stale coffee and cleaning supplies, Chloe listened. Remember the time she claimed the sommelier was mocking her with his choice of a German Riesling? One waiter recounted. Said it was a comment on her heritage, which is ridiculous because everyone knows her family is from Boston. What about when she insisted Amelia, the hostess, change her shade of lipstick because it was too provocative for a family establishment? Another added. Amelia had to go cry in the bathroom and scrub it off. These were stories of petty cruelty, but Chloe was looking for a pattern, a vulnerability. The common thread was Genevieve's obsession with appearances, with a very specific, almost theatrical performance of old money sophistication. The wine, the lipstick, the soup, they were all props in her personal stage play. Any deviation from the script was met with disproportionate rage. This suggested insecurity, not strength. Liam, the bartender, became her most valuable source. One slow Tuesday night, as he polished his collection of bitters bottles, Chloe leaned against the bar. "You've been here the longest, Liam. What was she like when she first started coming in?" Liam paused, his rag circling the rim of a bottle. "Different. Or trying to be the same but not as good at it. This was maybe 10 years ago, right after she married Richard. She was anxious, always watching other people, what fork they used, how they pronounced sommelier. She was learning a script. And Richard, he was just happy. I think he'd been a widower for years. Genevieve was beautiful, charming. He didn't see the gears turning underneath. Or didn't want to." Liam leaned in closer, his voice dropping. "The real interesting stuff is what nobody talks about. Before Richard, there was no Genevieve." Chloe's journalistic instincts tingled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the society pages started covering her the day her engagement to Richard was announced. Before that, nothing. It's like she just appeared out of thin air. A beautiful woman with a vague backstory about a quiet upbringing in New England. I've bartended at every high society haunt in this city for 20 years. I know all the families, the Bradfords, the Ashers, the Carringtons. I'd never heard of her family, the Vances. A woman with no past. That wasn't just a stone. That was a potential fault line. That night, Chloe went home to her small apartment, the $100 bill from Richard Davenport still tucked away. She didn't spend it. It felt like evidence. She fired up her old laptop, the keyboard worn smooth from thousands of hours of research. She started where any good investigator would, public records. She ran a search for Genevieve Vance, her supposed maiden name, with birth dates estimated to be within a 10-year range. The results were thin. A few women with that name, none of whom matched her age or had any connection to Chicago or Boston high society. It was a digital dead end, as if the name had been plucked from a novel. So she changed tactics. She searched for Richard Davenport and Genevieve Vance, focusing on news archives from around the time of their engagement 10 years ago. She found the official announcements in the major papers, the glowing profiles in society magazines. They all repeated the same sparse details: a whirlwind romance, a shared love for philanthropy, and Genevieve's quiet, respectable background. It was all too neat, too polished. Chloe started digging into the guest lists of the charity galas and society events Richard had attended in the year leading up to their meeting. If Genevieve had been circulating in those spheres, her name would appear somewhere. She spent hours scrolling through microfiche scans of old event programs and photo captions. Nothing. It was as Liam had said, Genevieve Davenport hadn't existed in that world until she was on Richard Davenport's arm. Frustration began to set in. Chloe was chasing a ghost. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling of her apartment. Where does a person with a fabricated past hide their real one? They scrub the present, but they can't always erase the past, especially in the pre-social media era. She tried a different kind of search. She opened a reverse image search tool and uploaded one of Genevieve's official society photos. The results showed hundreds of copies of the same photo from various magazines and blogs. Useless. Then she tried a cropped version, just her face. And then another, slightly older photo from a gala 8 years ago. 4 hours, nothing, just more society pictures. Then on the 12th page of results for the older photo, a strange link appeared. It led to a defunct website for a local talent agency in Bakersfield, California. The page was a poorly designed relic from the early 2000s, barely functional. But on the client headshot page, amidst a sea of aspiring actors with hopeful, desperate smiles, was a picture that made Chloe's breath catch. The photo was grainy, the quality poor. The girl in the picture was younger, maybe in her early 20s. Her hair was a brassy, over-bleached blonde, not the elegant champagne color Genevieve sported now. She wore too much blue eyeshadow and cheap, shiny lip gloss. But the bone structure was undeniable. The sharp jawline, the high cheekbones, the cold, determined set of her eyes. It was her. Beneath the photo was a name. Not Genevieve Vance. It was Jenny Albright. Chloe felt a jolt of adrenaline, the familiar thrill of the hunt. Jenny Albright from Bakersfield, California, a world away from the quiet New England upbringing of Genevieve Vance. She ran a new search, this time for Jenny Albright in Bakersfield. The results started to trickle in, then pour: a few local news articles from the early 2000s, a mention of her winning a local beauty pageant, and then she found it, the digital Rosetta Stone that would translate Jenny Albright into Genevieve Davenport. It was a link to a fan forum for a short-lived, deeply embarrassing reality TV show from 2004. The show was called Asphalt Angels. It followed the lives of a group of young women who worked as promotional models for a local monster truck rally circuit. They were loud, crude, and desperately chasing a very different kind of fame, and one of the show's main stars, known for her sharp tongue and dramatic fights with the other girls, was a fiery blonde named Jenny Albright. Chloe's hands trembled as she clicked on a link to a video clip someone had uploaded to a forgotten platform. The video quality was terrible, but the audio was clear. There she was, a much younger, much brasher version of Genevieve Davenport, wearing denim shorts and a tank top with a beer logo on it, screaming at another woman over a parking spot. Her accent wasn't the clipped, vaguely transatlantic accent of a society matron. It was a hard, flat Californian drawl. Chloe leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. The dragon didn't just have a crack in her armor. She had a whole other life buried beneath it. A life she had clearly spent millions of her husband's dollars to erase. The whispers in the restaurant were nothing. Chloe had just found the wire, the one she could pull to make the entire carefully constructed facade of Genevieve Davenport come crashing down. The discovery of Jenny Albright changed the dynamic, but Chloe knew she had to be cautious. A direct confrontation was foolhardy. Information like this was a weapon, and like any weapon, it was only effective if deployed at the right time in the right way. For now, she kept it as her secret ace, continuing her shifts at the Gilded Quill with the same unnerving calm as before. Her composure, however, was having an unintended effect on Genevieve. Chloe's refusal to be intimidated was like a grain of sand in the perfect sealed mechanism of Genevieve's world. It was a constant irritant. She couldn't stand it. If she couldn't break the new waitress with verbal assaults, she would have to escalate. She would have to ruin her.